Bonsoir. Hello, hello, everyone. Bonsoir. This is the future of France right now. Please applause Agne, Mounir, and
Hello,
Julian,
hello.
please.
Hello, East Denver. Great to be here.
Hello, hello. Hey guys, thanks for having me.
For the people coming, please take a seat. And we are just starting. The topic tonight is liquidity games. So we are talking about liquidity in blockchains and cryptocurrencies because we are here for that. The first question is, could you guys quickly introduce yourselves, please? So, Agne.
Sure. Hi, my name is Agne. I represent DeGate. DeGate is a decentralized exchange built on zero-knowledge technology. We focus on spot limit order trading. And so one of the key features is grid trading, a decentralized grid trading, a feature which is quite popular in centralized exchanges. And also we have permissionless token listing. So please check it out, dgate.com. Thank you.
Mounir, founder of Paraswap. Paraswap is a decentralized liquidity aggregator on Ethereum and various other chains. We've been around since 2019, and we are empowering our users from our UI, but also other dApps like Ledger, MetaMask, and others. So what we're building is really an infrastructure for other DeFi protocols and dApps to build on top of in order to access what you call best execution platform.
Julian?
Hey guys, my project Swivel was actually started 2 years ago here at ETH Denver as a hackathon. It was my first time trying Solidity, and honestly, it's just been a great ride since. What we exactly do is allow folks to collateralize, or rather take an interest-bearing deposit and turn it into two component cash flows. One would be the interest to some point in the future, and the other is the principal token, allowing you to redeem your cash. And the really end result for users is that allows people to either lock in a fixed rate that can either be relatively high based on the current market conditions, or can alternatively just speculate that rates will go up or down. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you, guys. The first question is, what is your opinion on the flow? Oh, sorry. What is your opinion on how the liquidity should flow from a blockchain to another one? I mean, from Ethereum to its layers, or from Solana to Ethereum, thing like that. So who wants to?
I'll go first. At the end of the day, I think everything is always driven by arbitrage, right? Whether that's regulatory or prices in different ecosystems. So, I mean, as far as liquidity goes, essentially the paradigm that I feel like has developed is obviously you have these insane ecosystem incentives from different players. This attracts obviously some initial liquidity, and then really all the money is made for the professional liquidity providers that are able to kind of either do time-based arbitrage or whatever inventory risk that they may be willing to take cross-chain and arbitrage these environments, right? I think this is really where you see a lot of actual growth, at least from these other chains, is when you start to actually have some minimal liquidity base for actual players to arbitrage.
I like the arbitrage approach because we can also look at it in a kind of a cost arbitrage. Everyone used to be on Ethereum literally a year ago, and those new blockchains or new layer ones were emerging. And the first arbitrage that we see was an arbitrage based on gas fees, on cost that was just becoming insane. And even though it was not acceptable to go outside of Ethereum, like everything was happening in Ethereum, the main reason was composability. Like everyone thought that once we step out of Ethereum, we're going to break composability. There's nothing that can be possible, which was proved to be wrong. And I guess arbitrage was the main incentive because it was just becoming insanely expensive on Ethereum. That, I think, was the first iteration in order to open the door for other chains to emerge. But the other misconception was like it has to be only EVM compatible for it to work. But to our surprise, we see other chains like Solana becoming so big that than many of those EVM chains. So I think it's more of now an opportunity arbitrage that we can see it proving itself to be working very well.
Sure, I can add some to here. It's really interesting to see how last year we saw the multi-chain ecosystem to evolve. A lot of people were critical, saying Ethereum is the only one. Others said that there will be lots of L1s, Ethereum killers. And look what happened. Really, the users chose where they want to be. Why did they choose? It was, of course, because of the gas fees, because of more accessibility to DeFi projects, but also because of incentives. So how they say in DeFi, whoever owns liquidity owns DeFi protocols. So those new protocols, now new layer ones, new apps, they offered crazy incentives. We all know the APYs that they offered. So here we also have to ask the question, are these the real users, or are these the incentive droppers, the hoppers through the protocol? So it will be really interesting to see next year, the year after, what layer ones will remain, what incentives will we have? Will we have the same incentive model that we're really just airdropping and giving tokens to the users who provide liquidity, and then they leave the protocol dry? So what will be really the solutions? Can we learn from centralized world maybe? Let's say Swivel Finance, they do interest rate derivatives. So even banks, although we don't like to talk about banks here, they do need to manage their portfolio, their liquidity, the interest rate exposure, the exposure to short-term, long-term securities. So we have to take a step further here and be more professional to incentivize users, not just by giving away tokens, but really to construct more advanced techniques for DeFi protocols to manage liquidity. Yeah.
And you mentioned multiple times rewards from users, and recently Paraswap launched their tokens. And don't you think it's kind of a rigged game, because some people are just here to chase those incentives token?
I think there has to be a sweet spot between providing the right incentives in order to bootstrap and look at that as a user acquisition strategy. Because the thing is, once we launch incentives, the first thing we will see is mercenary liquidity. That's going to emerge very quickly, and we'll try to also arbitrage another kinds of incentives. The problem is with that, it's very temporary, I would say traction, or like perception of traction. So I think incentives have to be with a clear user acquisition strategy, as what we can see in the Web 2.0. So if you look at, for instance, Uber launching in the city, the first thing they will do is that they're going to pay the drivers to just drive for free in order to cover part of the, let's say, the supply, in order to attract the users, so that the market is going to take care of itself later on a more advanced stage. So I think incentives has to come up with this clear and concrete strategy, instead of just attracting arbitrageurs or also mercenary liquidity that we unfortunately see more and more nowadays. So yeah, that's my take on it.
So I think this, to an extent, it goes back to the question of whether people that are just there for airdrops are real users. And honestly, on your point, I think also the differentiation between incentives that are there for bootstrapping and incentives that are there should be made, right? With our protocol, as an order book based, especially in interest rate swaps, we felt like we needed incentives at first, right? These are to bootstrap our protocol. However, there's a big differentiation between, I think, that and a lot of incentives which should be only there to kick off a positive feedback loop, right? If you feel that some amount of incentive can create a positive sum, obviously then it makes sense to do that. We haven't seen this a lot so far, right? I'd say there are some protocols out there that temporarily have not at least speculatively traded at some same premium to kind of distort this. But really, like that should be the goal. You want to design a system that is self-maintaining and that with these incentives can continue to grow.
Okay. And I would like to go back to the flow of liquidity. Don't you think that the cross-chain bridges would lead to, in the future, to more and more acts like we can see with the wormhole on Solana, or, with the more bridges comes more security, or it will be, I don't know, kind of games of who's the next hacker to make the big the big hack?
Yes. Right. I think the answer is yes. Of course, when there's more attack vectors, there's more risk. And I'm just more interested in hearing what everyone thinks about how you manage that as a protocol. One thing that I was tracking during the Solana hack was, of course, the peg breaking. It only broke after like 5 hours when there was a small bit of uncertainty whether jump would come in, and it only broke down to 2250. And when that happened, there was only, in my recollection, one Solana protocol that triggered their circuit breaker, and that was SolLend. And that is actually kind of terrifying for me, right? If there are a number of DeFi protocols that support leverage or borrowing, and the collateral could be worthless, and they're not triggering their circuit breakers. I don't know. Any thoughts from you guys?
But at the end, the bridges is a piece of code running on one chain and some security assumptions in order to secure that bridge. So no matter how the design is secure, if there is a bug on that contract, I mean, yes, it's just code that can break anytime. So it's never going to be as secure as a native blockchain, but there is some trade-offs that we can live with. And I think the future is maybe insuring those bridges with some new insurance protocols that some of them it's been around for years. But I don't see a clear solution because it's just a code running on one chain, another code running on the other chain, and some security assumptions that we put in on design with some game theory, and it's never going to be as secure as the native chain.
I would like to add here maybe something a bit controversial. I think it's very good that these things happening right now. We're so early. We're the first year of a multi-chain ecosystem right now. So we have to have these hacks. We have to fall. We have to get up again. We have to understand what level of decentralization is important and what level of centralization is important, because as you know, bridges, they do require some level of centralization to manage the smart contracts on both sides. So what will work the best for the huge amount of transaction when the whole world will be on multi-chains or how many blockchains? So we really need to learn these mistakes right now when we're still quite small, I think, yes.
It's a multi-billion-dollar mistakes, but okay.
Yeah, and I mean, again, if we didn't have that wormhole hack, we would not know that there are a lot of really irresponsible Solana ecosystem projects, right?
And do you know how to maintain a fair liquidity between all the blockchains? You know, at the beginning there were the BSC who drove all the liquidity from Ethereum. Now it's on Polygon and it's going to other layers 1 or EVM. And I mean, how to maintain a fair liquidity to make people earn money or, I mean, try different protocols.
So here's incentives, and I think right now we're in a very gamifying stage, let's put it this way. So people are jumping different protocols, you know, they're playing various games, earning incentives, then they're losing, they have rug pulls, etc. But we really want to adapt this world to new era of personal finance, new era of company finance, new era of everything, how the centralized finance was working, how the mortgages were giving, how the loans were giving. We want to apply this to decentralized finance. So right now we're only trying and seeing what works really. And yeah, so I think right now at this stage is incentives for now, and the users are driving this. As much as we can make this more interesting and more user accessible, user friendly, simple to use, then this will drive more liquidity to blockchain technology, I think, for sure.
Okay. Everything to add? No? Okay. Maybe we can take some questions from the audience. Does anybody have a question? No? We can go on. Oh, sorry, yes. The person with the...
Hello?
Yeah.
Yes. Could you talk a little bit about how self-provided liquidity works, like with Olympus Pro?
I'll talk about my general thoughts on the topic, right? And I can think this kind of relates that there were two big narratives going into the past year, which were protocol-owned liquidity and then Uniswap v3, honestly. Also Curve as well, but I consider these kind of similar in terms of the effects on the market. And objectively, when you start to actually look at Olympus Pro, it just has not performed. Whereas when you look at things like Uniswap v3, it has. However, these are on completely different axes. Pool Together had a really, really great objective report where they obviously had a data scientist going on this, and they essentially concluded that they were wasting, and it would take like 10 plus years to accumulate the liquidity through Olympus Pro for it to be sufficient to their current liquidity program. On the other side of this, they did feel that it really empowered their community to some extent, right? And I'd use Ribbon Finance as the complete polar opposite example, right? Where they've initially started with Uniswap v3 staker contracts, which were not the easiest to use, but were very capital efficient. They didn't have to spend as many tokens, but where they were, they didn't need to, and their community was just pissed off. So, like, what ended up happening was just massive liquidity providers would give one tick of liquidity on Uniswap v3 and take all the incentives. There's obviously, yeah, there should be something in the middle.
What I can add to that is there are always pros and cons, and it's still an experiment. I mean, it's very new, the protocol on liquidity. I can see a parallel with what we had previously when a project or a dApp with a token will launch, they will seek to create the market themselves. That was pre-DeFi summer, or like pre-DeFi 1.0, which led to DeFi projects asking the community for help, between quotes, in order to create this market. It turns out that it worked very well in 2020, but this evolved into a game of farming, which can be good and bad, but sometimes cannot be efficient for the protocol. So I think we're like coming back to the foundations where I built a project, I launch a token, then I will create the market, but who is me? Me, I am a DAO that's gonna control my own liquidity, so that those who want to buy or sell my token, they're always gonna find a decent market depth. So I think that's still an experiment, and there are a lot of forks. I think Olympus is one of the most forked projects nowadays, which may tell a story about their success story.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Anybody else?
I was just sharing the thoughts
Oh,
of
sorry,
Mounir.
I'm so
Hello,
fast.
good. So Olympus Pro is very interesting for me to follow. I studied traditional finance and derivatives market, so really interesting to follow what is happening and the rise and the fall of Olympus project. But definitely we see that perhaps the consumers, the retail consumers, will not be able to support the liquidity alone. We know that there are market makers, institutional liquidity providers, even to DEXs. So let's see how this new market evolves. Yeah.
On the note of derivatives, I'd give an extra shout out to the Primitive team, right? I don't know if you guys know Primitive Finance, but they're trying to essentially establish the idea that liquidity providers are essentially underwriting options, right? And so instead of having this system that's just completely based off of liquidity providers just underwriting options in this backwards way, they're having them actually underwrite options. So I think, like you're saying, there is a continued development of this sort of industry, especially as it regards to derivatives and how you can properly price things or replicate payoffs of more derivatives more exotic derivatives, excuse me.
Right, so how the traditional finance, again, sorry for this comparison, how do they manage, there are floors and caps, there are butterfly options, etc. It's very complex financial instrument, so I'm sure we will adopt some of the best practices here.
What we've seen a lot, or like what I've liked a lot so far, is just that people are realizing that it's very difficult or impossible to just create great options markets and are trying to replicate their payoffs, right? Whether it's convexivity or whatever it might be that someone is looking for in an option or something else. DeFi, they're just going around it at this point, right? And this is something, I guess, from my protocol's perspective, that's kind of scary. We run an order book, right? So if anyone's able to think of something clever, we might be screwed. Yeah.
I got a last question in mind. Usually, the retail investors don't really think, when they enter the crypto game, they don't really think about volatility. And I'd like to ask you, how does volatility could impact the liquidity between, cryptocurrencies?
So you need to use derivatives to manage the volatility, right? So.
Yeah. Like ideally, and this. So my project is specifically with regards to interest rates, right? And interest rates are extremely volatile in crypto. They've gotten better, But if you want to manage that risk, you need to use derivatives, right? And I guess going back, you're talking about how does retail get involved. This is partially, I think, related to how do you get liquidity across chains. You build aggregators, right? If you're able to build an aggregator that is able to simplify all of this for retail, and I mean for integrations, it's hard to get like 10 different people to integrate you, then you can actually effectively onboard these people, right? So I think when it comes to options, you'll start seeing things that are aggregating both like a direct option and maybe this replicated payoff. The more and more you see these things pop up, the easier it is for retail to just say, I like that yield, and that's good to me, right?
Okay, thank you very much. Does anybody have a last question before we finish forever? Yes, please.
Hi, I'm just curious what kind of market makers have partnered with Paraswap. Is there any smart market makers that you're looking to bridge with?
We have some who are public, like Wintermute and Chronos. Others are like semi or pseudonymous. It's like their choice. The goal is to expand and to have a large network. Now we have 7 market makers who are active in Paraswap. The goal is to have, I don't know, hopefully 50 or 100 in the future. So yeah, if you're interested, happy to talk to you.
So I'd like to thank my co-hosts, Agne from DeGate, Mounir from Paraswap, and Julian from Swivel. Please applaud them.
Thank
you very
you.
much.